In the last part, Goten and Trunks were able to achieve monstrous levels of power, and the feats that they were able to accomplish with said strength would make even the strongest warriors think twice before challenging them. On this path to power, we'd see these two tapping in the Super Saiyan 2 and fusing, which gave Beerus the best challenge he had up until that point, unlocking the legendary power of Super Saiyan God, which gave Frieza another reason to fear the Saiyan race, mixing the Super Saiyan form with the ki of a god, and showing Universe 6 the fruits of their labor, weaving the ferocious power of the Kaioken into the tranquil essence of the Super Saiyan Blue form, and taking down the likes of Merc Zamasu, and last but not least, taking everything they learned and creating a new form that would be praised by the likes of Jiren and the gods of destruction. These two have shown that they are more than capable of shattering any limits in their way, and in this video I plan on pushing these two even further. So let's see what would happen if Goten and Trunks actually tried. The sixth path to power that these two would most likely chase after is none other than MUI. You see, after the events of the Tournament of Power, although Goten and Trunks performed extremely well, it still wasn't enough to take down the Titan of Universe 11. Because of this, the two Saiyans would push themselves harder than they had before, and after seeing the feats that Goku was able to achieve with the use of MUI, they wouldn't hesitate to go after it the moment they get the chance. So for the next couple of months, the duo would spend all their free time training with Whis in an attempt to attain the angelic technique. Within that time, they learned to relax their minds and let their bodies take the lead in the fights. This would drastically improve their fighting skills, but it wouldn't be enough to achieve their goal. You see, due to the young Saiyans not being as experienced as Goku and Master Roshi when it came to the mastery of their mind and body, the two warriors would fall short. Now, as for which of the two would be closer to obtaining the technique, it'd most likely be Goten due to the diverse training he did at the start of his path to power. Anyways, given the short amount of time between the TOP and the events of the Broly movie, by the time Frieza rears his ugly head, the two half Saiyans would put their training on hold and address the problem at hand. As for how the events of the saga would play out, the beginning of it wouldn't change much, as both Goku and Vegeta would have their one-on-one battles against the legendary Saiyan. As for what Goten and Trunks would be doing during this time, well, your guesses are as good as mine. If anything, they'd probably be getting themselves in trouble. I can see them picking a fight with Frieza or something like that. However, the moment things heat up between Goku, Vegeta, and Broly, these two would immediately come to the aid of their fathers. Now, although they greatly outnumber Broly, I still don't think it would have been enough to take him down. Seeing as the giant didn't even budge against two Super Saiyan Blues in the original movie, I doubt that he'd have any trouble against 4 of them. Moving on, after taking a beating, this is where Goku and Vegeta fled in the movie in order to fuse. However, since Goten and Trunks would be here, that wouldn't happen, and instead Gotenks would make an appearance. Since Gotenks wouldn't be as strong as Gogeta due to a couple of factors, he'd obviously tap into higher powers to perform the feats his father did. So right out the gate, Super Saiyan 3 Gotenks would face off against Super Saiyan Broly, and with as strong as Gotenks is now, he'd immediately put the Saiyan on the back foot, and once Broly goes into his full power Super Saiyan, they'd kick it into Super Saiyan Blue 2 Kaioken times 40. And although they wouldn't have much time, I do believe at this level of strength, they'd be able to put the Jolly Green Giant down. And if the fusion does time out, then Goku and Vegeta would take it from there. Either way, Broly wouldn't be victorious. Moving on, the 7th path to power would be Super Saiyan Blue Evolution. Now I know what you're thinking, why would they go after this form when MUI is obviously stronger in every way? Well, you see, after months of training with Whis, although they made progress, it was evidence that acquiring this technique was going to take some time which they didn't have. With Broly only appearing months after the events of the Tournament of Power, it was clear to both Goten and Trunks that stronger foes were going to keep arising, and it needed something that would quickly give them an edge besides fusion. So with this new goal in mind, they'd go to Vegeta with a simple request of teaching them how to tap into SSB evolution. Now the Prince at this point in time, after seeing how much effort these two have put into bettering themselves, would agree. The first and most important thing that he'd tell them is that this form is the natural progression of Super Saiyan Blue, and it should be looked at as the true successor to the form, rather than the form that they used during the TOP, which was created by mixing Super Saiyan God with Super Saiyan 2. With this tip in hand, they'd have a clear vision on how to tackle achieving the form, and after a few months of training with the Prince, they'd eventually unlock it. Once achieved, due to Super Saiyan Blue evolution being extremely stable, it wouldn't take too long for the two warriors to weave the Kaioken into the transformation, giving birth to Super Saiyan Blue evolution Kaioken times 20. With both their father's powers working in tandem, the two head into the next saga as the most powerful Z fighters. Going into the Moro saga, believe it or not, Goten and Trunks would not join their fathers on their trip to battle against Moro on New Namek. This is because in the manga, while Beerus was apprehending Goku, Vegeta, and Buu, these two were nowhere to be seen, so they remain here on Earth for the time being, as we don't know why they weren't here. Could have been something to do with school, who knows. Moving on, a few days would go by and we'd find Goten and Trunks on the lookout with a majority of the Z Fighters. Now the second that 7-3 and his gang arrived, these two would absolutely demolish them, and this forces 7-3 to use Moro's stored power much earlier than in canon. With it, the android would make short work of everyone on the battlefield. This is due to the fact that no one would know how Moro's abilities work. But before 7-3 kills our heroes, Moro tells him to spare them in hopes of taking Goten and Trunks' power for himself. Now since Moro would be coming to Earth for the two Saiyans instead of Goku and Vegeta, this wouldn't give our heroes much time to prepare. As in the manga, Jacko was able to delay Moro's arrival by telling his subordinate that it would take Goku and Vegeta 2 months to get here, which gave them more time. However, in this scenario, since Moro would be coming for Goten and Trunks, they'd only have 20 days like he originally intended. And within those 20 days, in a desperate attempt to get stronger, the two Saiyans would venture into the Room of Spirit and Time, where just like their fathers before them, they'd train for 3 years straight, and thanks to this, by the time they leave the chamber, they would have grown, both physically and in terms of strength. But they wouldn't be the only ones to go into the chamber. I can see Gohan and Piccolo taking things into their own hands. Piccolo would wish to have his potential unlocked by Shinron far earlier than in canon, and both he and Gohan trained within the time chamber for 3 days in hopes of taking down Moro. Once the Warlock arrives, Goten, Trunks, Gohan, and Piccolo would make short work of his entire army, leaving the 4 to face off against him. Gohan and Piccolo go into their ultimate forms, and Goten and Trunks unleash Super Saiyan Blue Evolution Kaioken times 20. They'd all rush Moro, and with their combined strength, they'd overpower the Warlock. In retaliation, Moro begins to absorb their ki, but even with this, he'd still take an abundant amount of damage. With each passing moments, our heroes would grow weaker and weaker as Moro took their energy. Not having much time nor energy left, they'd all go for the killing blow, but Moro would drain them dry. The Warlock would then begin to beat down Goten, trying to kill the young Saiyan first. He goes for the kill, and 2 things would happen. First, Gohan ki erupts as he taps into something ferocious, and second, Moro would realize that he'd missed the finishing blow. To his surprise, Goten dodged it. Standing before the Warlock was Beast Gohan and Ultra Instinct Saiyan Goten. The two brothers stare Moro down, and with their combined strength, they'd overpower the Warlock, fighting in tandem and eventually landing a brother's Kamehameha that eviscerates him. After the events of the Moro Saga, Goten and Trunks would continue their training. However, due to their inclusion in the story, a few things would have changed, that being the birth of Beast Gohan and Ultimate Piccolo. As for Goku and Vegeta, once the two realized that the Earth was safe, they'd continue their separate training, and Vegeta would master everything the Yardrites had to offer him. As for Goku, he trained with mirrors to his heart's content, and he'd eventually learn how to tap into MUI consciously. Now heading into the Granolah the Survivor Saga, Goten and Trunks continue their training with Whis. Goten would try to tap into Ultra Instinct Sign again, whilst Trunks was still trying to achieve it. As the months pass, Trunks makes note of his father's training with the God of Destruction, and somewhere along the line he'd eventually begin to train with them, seeing as he was having a hard time trying to tap into MUI. By the time the Heaters arrived to bring our heroes to planet Serial, the young warrior's strength would increase tremendously. Goten would be able to tap into UI Sign with some difficulty. As for Trunks, he'd walk away from Beerus' training barely being able to wield the Hakai. Moving on, when they arrive on planet Serial, Goku would take the lead like he did in canon. However, due to the inclusion of Goten and Trunks, I believe that there would be a high possibility that when Granolah goes for a sneak attack against our character hero, one of these two could react fast enough to at least get him out the way. Thanks to this, we'd be able to see a fight that didn't happen in the manga, MUI Goku versus the real Granolah. As for how this fight goes down, I believe it's safe to say that MUI Goku would take it. This is because unlike Vegeta, who lost due to not being accustomed to his new form, Goku on the other hand wouldn't have that same weakness. With Granolah out of the way, Vegeta would be able to explain everything that he had suspected without any interference, and when Monito shows up, he cleared the air between the Saiyans and the Cerealian. And since they'd get this information far quicker than they originally did, they'd put 2 and 2 together and realize that the Heaters are actually the bad guys, and because of that they'd confront them. Now from this point it could go one of 2 ways. The first being that Goku, Vegeta, Goten, and Trunks would apprehend the Heaters and probably call the Galactic Patrol to take care of them, putting an end to this saga. Or if the Heaters acted fast after the defeat of Granolah, we could see Gas facing off against our heroes. As for how the fight plays out, with the use of MUI Goku and UI Sign Goten, our heroes would be able to keep up for the time being. But as soon as Granolah arrives to help them, and Vegeta taps into Ultra Ego, this is where we would see them starting to push Gas back. And due to the abundant amount of strong fighters, Gas's body would probably continue to age in order to give him more power. Eventually, as the fight dragged on, Gas's body would run through the young warrior's lifespan trying to keep up. Goku, Goten, and Trunks would plead with the warrior in hopes of saving his life, but it'd be too late as Gas would have been a shell of his former self. He'd continue to fight, trying to prove to his brother that he was worth his admiration, and the more and more that he fought, the more his body began to break down, and he'd eventually fade to dust, putting an end to this saga. In both of these scenarios, thanks to the saga ending far earlier than expected, it's highly unlikely that our heroes would run into Black Frieza as they take their leave after cleaning up their mess, which is very unfortunate because we wouldn't be able to see this scene right here. The 9th path to power would be Master Ultra Instinct for Goten and Ultra Ego for Trunks, and seeing as the time between the Granolah saga and the Superhero saga was around 2 to 3 years, it's safe to say that they'd without a doubt have the techniques within their arsenal. When the saga begins, I believe that Goten and Trunks would still be fans of the popular movie hero, Clean God, so a lot of the shenanigans that took place in the prelude chapters would still happen here. However, Goten and Trunks wouldn't even bat an eye at the androids as they take care of them with little difficulty. Also, I do believe that they'd use the Dragon Balls to revert their ages so that they wouldn't be too old for their grade. Moving on, when the Red Ribbon Army finally makes their move on Gohan and Piccolo, it wouldn't end too well for them. Piccolo alone would make short work of Gamma 2 and he'd demand to know who made him. However, I don't think Gamma 2 would tell him because as we've seen, Gamma 2 is a very passionate character that takes his job extremely seriously. So with no leads, Piccolo goes in for the kill only to be stopped by Gamma 1, who would have interfered to stop the death of his brother. However, even with their combined power, they wouldn't be able to stop Piccolo the moment he goes orange. With them out the way, Piccolo would inform everyone about what had just transpired, and they'd prepare themselves for an inevitable showdown. As for how the Red Ribbon Army would respond, well, I do believe that Dr. G.o.D would use Gamma 1's and 2's death to collect data and create 2 new Gammas like he implied he would do in the movie. He'd also be able to convince Magenta to postpone the activation of Cell Max, as from what they could tell, Piccolo at this point could probably take down Cell Max alone or with the aid of others, so they'd wait. And due to them postponing the activation of Cell Max as well as taking their time to create more Gammas, Piccolo and the others would have more time to train. Once completed, Dr. G.o.D would send out Gammas 3 and 4 after Piccolo once again. However, due to our heroes being prepared for this, the Namekian wouldn't be alone. Gohan and his mentor would fight side by side and they'd barely manage to defeat the upgraded androids. But their struggle wouldn't end there, as after the defeats of Gammas 3 and 4, Dr. G.o.D would have all the information he needed on his opponents and he'd release Perfect Cell Max. Now from what we know, Cell Max wasn't finished, and if we can assume that he was in his second form, then his jump to his perfect form would be tremendous. When Goten and Trunks arrive on the battlefield, they'd be shocked by the immense power radiating from Dr. Gero's creation. Our heroes would take on their highest transformations and they'd begin to go toe to toe with the android. But they'd quickly learn that it wasn't enough, and in hopes of stopping Cell Max now, Goten and Trunks fuse. Base Gotenks appears and looks at Cell Max, knowing that he would need to use everything. However, he knew that at the strength that he was at now, the moment he goes into his highest form, he wouldn't have a lot of time to do much, and he decides to finish the fight in one blow. The fusion key erupts and the earth begins to tremble, and Gotenks concentrates as he tries to do the impossible, taking 2 opposing ideologies and melding them together. Gotenks lets out a powerful yell and combines the angelic technique of the angels with the destructive power of the gods. Once this form was achieved, he wouldn't waste any time and he'd rush the android. He infuses his fist with all of his ki, and as he does so, he could feel his entire being struggling to hold together, as if it was trying to rip him apart. But he'd fight through it, and with one powerful punch, he'd erase Cell Max from existence. He'd raise his hand to the air and the fusion would dissipate, putting an end to this saga. And with that, this marks the end to this part. Now, it's never really been a question of whether or not Goten and Trunks could ever get this strong, but I heard a lot of good feedback for why they are the way they are, like how they were born in a different time that's much more peaceful than what Gohan had to go through, so of course their behavior would reflect that. Either way, it was still fun pushing these 2 to their limits. Thanks to everyone that watched this video. I hope you have a great day. Peace, peace, deuce, deuce.